Good morning, my name is Lucas Joe, and I am an elementary education and special education dual major. I'm very excited to be here today, as this is my final phase before graduation and moving on to an actual career. So thank you for allowing me to be here. For my capstone, I chose theme 6, which is teaching diverse learners. I really focused on differentiating instructional planning. And for that I chose my competency statement as I am competent in differentiating instructional planning that meets the needs of students. And to guide this competency statement, I kind of use the questions, why is it important to plan differentiation into lessons, and how can a teacher differentiate lesson plans so that their students' needs are met? Because we must consider those student needs. So I really wanted to go back as far as I possibly could and decided spring 2014 was when I had my first practicum as a student. And in my Teach 297A class, I was with a group of second graders and taught them about garbology and this idea of how much trash do you generate and how much of this trash is actually leaching into the ground, into our groundwater, and this idea of looking at landfills and how they are designed. So for this lesson, I used a lot of great teaching strategies. A lot of positive things came out of this. I incorporated some literature through a Shel Silverstein poem. I actually drew some visuals on the board so the students could see what the different types of landfills looked like. And then I actually modeled the landfills so the students seen what the landfill was like right in front of them. And we poured water on it and watched it leach through. So it was a great lesson. But I had forgot about one ELL student in the classroom. And this student spoke very little English. He was actually qualified in special education. This was before I had decided to be a SPED major. But either way, I had completely forgotten this student. And fortunately, my CT at the time was able to come over and provide this student with some work. Otherwise, he would have just been sitting there not knowing what's going on. And I just assumed that an ESL teacher was going to take him into another classroom, as she had many times before. And that's a terrible assumption to make. This student is in my classroom and is a part of my responsibility. So looking at this first piece of evidence, I did not differentiate at all. I had a date, a lesson title, a purpose, materials, an introduction, procedure, closure, evaluation, but I had not considered challenging those students that found this easy. I did not consider reteaching these students that didn't understand what the concepts were or what the vocabulary was. Or I didn't consider this ELL student who may have needed additional materials. So moving into my second piece of evidence, I had now went through math block, which included gearing up and gearing down. I went into my literature block and learned about guided reading and the different levels of readers and how to assess these readers and how do we place them, really differentiating that education. I moved into my methods class and learned strategies to make education more individualized for each student. And in my SPED classes, I was learning about leveling this playing field, making it an equal playing field for all these students, whether they have disabilities or whether they need additional challenging. So I was getting this idea of on level, above level, enrich, reteach, but I realized there was more to differentiation than just that aspect. And I realized this in my second evidence. During my Teach 305 class, which is a science methods class, I reflected in my science portfolio and noted that personally, I want to allow students to inquire their own thoughts and conceptions, allowing them with the choice to manipulate and perform their experiments. So I wanted students to have the choice to decide the direction of their education. And this is a prime way of differentiating education. Let them choose. Furthermore, I seen through my lesson that I taught that there was classroom management differentiation that was occurring here. I had a group of sixth graders that made rockets. I gave them this choice to build these rockets. They could do whatever they wanted. They had so many supplies, build it how you wanted, and then we launched it off. Well, while 2 kids were launching their rockets, the others were observing, but didn't have a lot to do. I should have planned something like an announcer or let the kids blow bubbles, because we were studying chemical reactions and vinegar and baking soda and the chemical reaction that was occurring. They could have been blowing bubbles, the same chemical reaction. But instead they were bored and behaviors were occurring, and these 6th graders can be very inappropriate at times. So I also learned that differentiation can expand beyond just on level and above level, but into classroom management. So I move on to my 3rd piece of evidence. I'm now in my student teaching at Malcolm, and I want to pull all these ideas of differentiation together, giving these students choice, giving them resources that they need, giving them that on level, above level, special education that they need. So, my 3rd piece of evidence is an assessment that I designed. It is a performance assessment. It is not just multiple choice. It is not true and false. It is not short answer. Rather, it was a one-on-one test where the students actually performed the task in front of me, then wrote their answers. I wasn't giving them the answers, but they were performing it in front of me like they were getting that special attention that they need, that individualized education, and then copying their answers down. So for this, the students had several different items that they could choose to buy. Whatever they wanted, they would circle that item, and then they had 2 different boxes where they would put how much or how they would pay for these items. So this gave the students that choice. I'm differentiating their education and allowing them this choice. Then they went on to answer a couple more questions about whether you could buy this, pulling in that, assessment piece, really see what the students know. While this was happening, since it was a one-on-one test, the other students were around the classrooms playing on iPads. I had downloaded several money games that they could practice with. Other students were doing board games that were money related. Some of the students were doing worksheets, because some students just really want to please the teacher and get those worksheets and have that hard, I wrote this and did this worksheet to feel accomplished. So I gave the students several different activities to choose from, which was my classroom management differentiation. And then my last piece to individualize this and differentiate it was I let these students who I was working with during the test use different manipulatives and resources. I had the play money and let the kids actually build the amount if they wanted. They had whiteboards, they had pencils. A couple of my special ed students had these money number lines where they could say, hey, I have a quarter. They don't know what a quarter is worth, but then they see it, it's 25 cents. And the size of this goes with how much the money is worth. So then they could put their dime and they could build their amount, however it be, all the way up to what they needed. So I was giving the students resources to manipulate with their hands to differentiate this lesson. So moving into my synthesis, I first learned in my first piece of evidence that I had little or no differentiation at all. As I moved into my second, I realized the different levels of learners, but also seen that differentiation can happen in other aspects of your lessons. For the third piece of evidence, I realized that many, many areas of teaching all pull together to be a part of differentiation. Whether it's instructional planning in our assessments, or in instructional planning for classroom management, or instructional planning for just the material alone and the resources that are going to be used. So in reflection, I have grown a lot over the past 3.5 years. I went from a student that couldn't recognize differentiation to a student that can pull it all together into one. I want to continue growing as a professional and have the goal to continue this differentiation in my lessons, as well as to improve my classroom management and improve my ability to come up with more performance assessments. So I thank you for your time and wish everybody the best.